Hello, everybody. Welcome to our new podcast. Today we'll be talking about human heredity and genetics.
Oh, wow. So cool. But what is human heredity, Amber?
Well, Eva, human heredity is the passing of genetic information from parent to offspring.
So, how is genetic information passed down through DNA?
Well, DNA is passed down through these things called chromosomes, which is a structure that can be found inside the nucleus of a cell.
I understand that. But how does that involve the mother and the father?
Good question, Eva. Well, one copy of DNA is inherited from their mother, which is the egg, and the other copy of DNA is from the father, which is the sperm. Each parent would give 23 chromosomes, so the offspring will contain 46 chromosomes in total.
So, you said 23 chromosomes. So, the child will get 50-50 of each parent's traits and genes, right?
That's right. That also includes how genes are spread amongst siblings, too.
That all seems pretty complicated. I wonder how anybody could have come up with that stuff.
It was the genius himself, Gregory Mendel.
Gregor Mendel? You mean the man who discovered the law of segregation, law of independent assortment, and the law of dominance? He seems really smart.
What did he use to understand genetics and how?
Gregor Mendel used pea plants.
So, how does DNA get replicated in order to pass on genes to the offspring?
Firstly, DNA looks like a spiral ladder that pretty much looks just really twisty.
Exactly, and we call that twisted ladder a double helix. When the double-stranded helix opens up and the DNA strands separate, we have something called priming, which happens on the template strand. This helps assemble new DNA segments. Lastly, the enzyme that is called a polymers organize DNA strands.
So, basically, a double stranded DNA molecule is duplicated and formed into an identical DNA molecule.
Yeah, to put it bluntly.
Okay, so I understand how DNA replication is made, but what are the building blocks to form DNA?
Oh, they are adenine, costine, guanine, and thymine, which are nucleotides.
So, exactly what do these base pairs do, Amber? Or Ronnie?
These nucleotides are located on opposite strands of the DNA, and they form chemical bonds.
Yeah, and the chemical bonds act like a rope that holds the strands of DNA together.
And there are two strands of DNA, right, Amber?
Right. But the pea plants were the perfect match for fast results. They're easy to grow and have easily distinguishable
Changes.
and they have easily changes of inherited phenotypes from the parent's originality. Pea plants show a trait of phenotypes by a single gene. This is called Mendelian traits. Whereas humans take longer to develop, they are sometimes life-threatening.
Life-threatening? What do you mean life-threatening?
Well, most human genetic diseases and disorders are recessive. So if both parents have a recessive gene for disorders or diseases, that is a chance that the offspring will have it too. That's where human genetics and inbreeding come to play.
Okay, Amber, that's cool and all. But in human heredity, people refer to the X and Y chromosome. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so the X chromosome is usually referred to the female determining gene, and the Y chromosome refers to the male determining gene.
Right. And those are known as sex chromosomes that helps determine the sex and character traits of your offspring, like I said earlier. Also, I'm not that strong in human genetics. Can you clear some things up?
Sure, Amber. Human genetics, which pretty much is the study of inheritance of characteristics from child to parents. Inheritance in humans does not really differ from any fundamental way from that in other organisms. So, producing offspring in plants is the same as humans.
Ah, yes. Inbreeding is bred from closely related people or animals, especially over many generations. For example, if a father has one recessive allele for sickle cell, then their siblings or relatives probably has it too. So if the father produces offspring with a random person, then the passing of the recessive gene will be a little bit to none. But if the father produces offspring with his recessive or sibling, then the recessive gene or sickle cell, the chance of the offspring having sickle cell is much higher.
Some examples of human heredity being life-threatening can bring you back all the way about 3,300 years ago, around 1324 BC. King Tut. The royal pharaohs of Egypt were very inbred. Pharaohs at the time were considered living gods, so for the family to keep this godly power within them, the family would inbreed. Though because his parents were already related, it brought up some problems later on.
What are examples of these problems? King Tut must have looked horrible.
Well, yeah. King Tut came from Octagon, which came from Octagon, which is his father. His father married his sister to make King Tut. Then later in his life, King Tut had serious problems with malaria and other bone disorders, which then resulted in a club foot needing a cane to walk. He also had a cleft palate, which causes the mouth and the nose not to join at birth, a massive overbite, fused vertebrae, which caused problems with spinal fusion and blood problems. Tut even had very feminine hips and large breasts.
Wow, thank God I wasn't King Tut. Anyway, just remember, inbreeding does not cause genetic mutation. Inbreeding can only increase the chance of genetic mutation or rare genetic disorders. Like if both parents carried a recessive gene for a disorder, that is only 75% chance that they will not pass on a gene.
Alike in Egypt, when pharaohs would inbreed to keep their godly power, the Habsburg would inbreed to consolidate their power throughout Germany and Austria. The Habsburg family is known for Charles II, the Habsburgian in 1665. Charles's father was Philip IV, who then married his sister's daughter, making Philip Charles's father and great uncle at the same time. Crazy, right? Problems about the Habsburg jaw included a bulbous lower lip, chewing problems, speaking problems, and don't forget beauty. Not even Botox can cover that up.
Yes, actually, but there is some benefits. Inbreeding can benefit living things other than humans, like animals.
Animals? What do you mean by animals?
To this day, some dogs, like mutts, are inbred with their siblings for specific traits. This is also known as selective breeding or artificial selection.
Why inbreed dogs? Doesn't that create higher chances of genetic mutations and disorders?
Yes, it does, but if prevented in a safe environment, then specific traits like coat colors, height, or snout size can be passed on. Though some recessive traits can be passed on, including hip problems like dysplasia, eye problems like blindness, or breathing problems because of snout size. Breathing problems can relate to dogs such as pugs.
Oh yeah, I have a pug myself. That's all really important information for inbreeding, but I think that we need to get back on topic. Human genetics.
Yes, let's talk about autosomal dominant inheritance and autosomal recessive inheritance.
I've never heard of that before. I thought you just inherited genotype and phenotype based on random combinations and mutations.
That's true for only some cases, but autosomal dominant inheritance and traits are usually associated with a single gene, a non-sex chromosome. The real reason why they are called dominant genes is because even if they are only one copy of the dominant gene, trait is enough to appear later on.
Like, let's say that if a parent with the genotype, like with the genotype VV, lowercase v and lowercase v, produces offspring with a parent type with genotype uppercase v and lowercase v, the offspring will possibly have produced a 50-50 chance of inheriting the dominant capital V genome. So if the parents were to produce
Exactly. Now, autosomal recessive is when a trait, disorder, or disease can be passed down through families, meaning that they can be carriers of the disease or disorder without necessarily being affected by the disorder. Sometimes carriers of the disease may not know that they're carriers since they have never had it.
That's crazy. They must have known that they had a disorder. If the disease is sometimes not presented, how does it work for those affected?
Well, for a recessive trait, to be presented, there has to be 2 recessive copies in females and 1 in a male. There could also be a possibility that there's one recessive and one dominant, which can be found in a female.
So, if both parents were unaffected carriers with genotypes uppercase R and lowercase r, and uppercase R and lowercase r, then the possible genotype for the offspring would be double uppercase R, unaffected. Double uppercase R, lowercase r, and uppercase R, lowercase r carriers that are unaffected, and lowercase r affected.
A popular way to get a basic idea of inheritance is the use of a Punnett square. The Punnett square is never 100% accurate, but it gives a basic idea of the possible outcome.
I think that's all the time we have. So let's finish off with a quick summary before we have to go. Okay, so human heredity is the passing on genes to offspring. And without Mendel's, we wouldn't have been able to figure out gene regulation. And we talked about the fundamentals of forming replicating DNA using the double helix and replicated adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine to form DNA.
We also talked about genetics, and you might ask how, I don't know.
How it ties to human heredity. Genetics are very important to how a person looks inside and out. Inbreeding that can create a higher chance of mutation in the genotypes and what is passed down into offspring. Like King Tut, his distinctive features are because of human heredity.
King Tut was so hot.
Yeah, definitely. Anyways, I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, and we hope that you liked it. Please like and subscribe.